All right, so today we're going to dive into some Web3 content. I think you guys will like it. Really, what we want to do is explore how many of these companies are starting to navigate these waters. There's a lot happening around this space, whether you think Metaverse or you think Web3 and kind of this conversion. All that we're going to talk about today. It's going to be a good one, and we've got a special guest for you. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today is Herman Narula, who is the CEO of Improbable. We've had and talked about Improbable a lot, but thanks for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on.
All right, so Herman, let's get into a few things here, and I want to kind of first kind of get a framework around Improbable for some of our new audience, maybe people that are experimented with their first NFT, started to learn about Web3 a little bit. Give us a framework quickly on where Improbable is today.
Sure. So, in order to make valuable virtual experiences that are differentiated from what people can already do, like play games or interact in the real world, you have to give people something really new and really valuable. And doing that means expanding the scope of what virtual experiences can be. So, what Improbable has spent years doing now, I mean, a decade of our lives with iteration after iteration of technology, is making it possible to support not just 100 people in a space, but tens of thousands of people connecting from anywhere in the world on a mobile phone or a PC or a Mac just by clicking a link to jump into a world which isn't just a game, but is an environment that can support all of those people talking, speaking, singing in some cases, happy birthday in this example that you're showing me right now.
Yeah.
Also interacting with each other in incredibly rich and social ways. And to make that possible, we have to handle orders of magnitude more information on the back end. So recently we did an event with Major League Baseball where we brought thousands of baseball fans into a virtual stadium all over the world. That type of thing takes billions of messages a second that all have to be delivered at low latency to hundreds of countries and have to be done in a way that can survive hackers or other problems. So building the infrastructure to build practical, useful, and valuable virtual worlds is fundamental to what we do and have done. Another aspect of what we do is we make it possible to have richer digital items. So an NFT is really great as a token of ownership, but it doesn't actually do anything, as I think a lot of people have said more loudly on Twitter recently than before. So we created a language called Metaverse Markup Language, and it's totally open source. It's MIT licensed, and it lets you build like a complicated, rich object just using JavaScript and HTML that can describe something that can live in a game, or it can live in a web browser or anywhere else, and it can link to an NFT if you want. And those objects exist inside all of the worlds that are part of the MSquared network, which Improbable
Right.
has incepted for the partners.
All right, so a lot happening here, and of course, the technological achievements have been pretty significant here. When you look at where the metaverse is today, and you know, kind of, I guess to a certain extent, I think a lot of people saw metaverse come onto the scene when Meta changed their name. That was kind of the iconic event that occurred. We saw a lot of projects start to open up in 2021, late 2021, and early 22. When you look at the challenges inside Metaverse, because right now what we're seeing is quite a few people who look at it, whether it's brands or you look at even users and players, they're saying some metaverses are absolute, wastelands. There's nobody there. There's a challenge of interoperability. We've got all these big picture issues that have not really been addressed right now. Where do you feel the maybe the short term future, but more long term future is for metaverses in general?
Well, let's start by saying there's more than 600 million monthly active people in Minecraft, Roblox, and Fortnite. And
Sure.
Phil Rosedale, who created Second Life, is one of the kind of founding kind of advisors of MSquared. If those people interacting in virtual spaces, buying and selling things, moving them from place to place, creating things, kids coming home from school and having whole new experiences, brands showing up there, if that isn't metaverse or metaverse like, then I think we're stretching the definition to some extent. So there is already
Sure.
a massive, almost a significant percentage of young human beings on Earth with access to these technologies are interacting inside these spaces. The interesting question to build on your question is what's going wrong with crypto metaverses
Hmm.
or Web3
Yeah.
metaverses or VR metaverses? And I think what's going wrong with them doesn't require a lot of speculation. We know the answer because 30 years of psychology and engagement research in interactive entertainment tell us the answer. The experiences are bad. if the experiences are bad, it doesn't matter what fancy NFT they're linked to or what VR goggles I put on. If you're not providing me with fulfillment, and that fulfillment can only come in a few ways, it can come from a social experience that I couldn't otherwise have. It could come from competence, the feeling of getting better at something, or it could come from making meaningful choices. Then there is no real future to it. And I think the other big challenge with a lot of these projects is they're swimming against economic reality. So if the entire ecosystem you've built is around a bunch of people who've bought assets with the expectation, whether or not you marketed it that way, that those assets will go up in value, definitionally, you can't make money that way. The only way you can make money is if people buy stuff that they don't necessarily want to sell on. I mean, if you think about your house, most of the items in your house you probably don't want to sell on. I bought a sandwich recently. I don't want to sell that on. I want to eat that. So if there's no function, there's nothing wrong with people owning assets that are memorabilia or artwork, etc. But that isn't the foundation of a diverse and valuable ecosystem of users. And I think on the VR side, while I actually am a believer in the immersive value of things like VR and AR, I don't necessarily know that they are the answer for some of the problems that the metaverse can really solve. I mean, we've talked a lot about sport. I mentioned baseball, and you've shown some stuff on screen. This isn't a gimmick. This is solving an economic problem that is at the heart of sport, right? If I told you there was a company that had 600 million active users right now, and those users joined it from birth and would kill you if you tried to make them buy a different product, and they taught their children until the day they died, how much money is that company worth, that brand worth? Well, Real Madrid is that, and you'd think it would be worth hundreds of billions. It's estimated at about 5. Why? Because about every year they make less than €1 per fan. And that's not because fans aren't passionate. It's because, well, if I can't come to the game because I live in Southeast Asia, or if I can't meet a player, or if I can't have a social experience, or if I can't really engage and feel involved, well, what can I have? So, some of the events we've been the last couple of weeks, like meeting famous football players inside an environmental space where everyone can speak, these expand the scope of culture, of sport, of music, of these other areas. So I think the metaverse has to solve a problem, and that problem can't be that you want your token to be more valuable. If that's the problem the metaverse is solving, then it's not solving a problem.
It's broken, sure, exactly. Well, you hit on a couple of really interesting points here, and I think this is something that a lot of people have to get over to understand, kind of this little bit of this concept of what maybe the real future of metaverses are, as opposed to what we'll see in the blockchain space. Two things you hit on there, of course, is this brand equity or brand properties that are being, transcended into a place like what you mentioned there with Real Madrid, biggest soccer club maybe on planet Earth. When you think about that, expanding that out there, lots of great opportunity there, and obviously that will be a big part of that. You also mentioned, just the existing Fortnite, Roblox kind of connection. Those are already kind of metaverses today. They're just not necessarily running on a blockchain. So there are some things like that. Now, in terms of this capacity, because Improbable, of course, is solving some challenges here. You look at the current player count record that has been achieved by you guys, and you look at, you had even mentioned, the size of Real Madrid alone, and think about that times 1,000 if you look at all the entities of NFL, MLB, NBA, and then, the World Soccer Leagues. There's a lot of fans out there. What are the capacities for blockchain metaverses in the future?
So we're able to host entire stadiums full of people at this point, and you can have many of those events running in parallel. And so you could literally take the ticket revenue of a sports league, and if there was demand at an international level, you could just grow the number of fixtures, events, experiences, and ticketed people who can come in. I mean, assuming you wanted a ticket, you don't have to, because we can run it cheap enough. You could do it for free. If you could bring Call of Duty style monetization, that's 2 to 6% of the audience spending most of the money, to things with 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion users and fans. And you could make that interoperable, and you could make that accessible, especially to people on a mobile phone. I mean, let's think beyond football, cricket. There's 1 billion cricket fans out there, and you look at a 4G map of India, and you see some pretty amazing things in terms of internet access. If you're able to do that, you're not just talking about building a tech company or improving the metaverse or improving Web3. You're really making people's lives fundamentally, better for things they really care about. One of the things we found is that becomes like a vast opportunity. In terms of capacity, the blockchain really is just a tool. In the demos that you've just shown on screen, there are AI-based bandwidth compression algorithms. There's new approaches we've taken to rendering that don't exist in existing game engines. In fact, we've actually built a new method to allow generative AI objects to appear dynamically inside worlds. We don't talk about any of this because honestly, these are just tools. And that's how I look at the problem with the conversation these days. Like for me, blockchain, and this is going to sound really bad, but blockchain is like a sewage system. I'm very happy it's there. And if it wasn't there, we couldn't have great cities and we couldn't build a lot of good stuff. But I don't want users walking through the sewage system, right? It needs to fade like open source software, like infrastructure into the background. It needs to be a powerful enabler for things that your grandma likes, for things that, the average, football fan or gamer like, without having to think about, is this an NFT? Is this on the blockchain? Is this a wallet? Is this whatever? That's the key to really making something really valuable. So, our philosophy, and this maybe as a result of being at this 10 years, having the hopes and dreams, seeing things not work, seeing things work, and building and building and building. I think a lot of people in the NFT space are quite recent sometimes. It's just pragmatism. Like, let's just create the things that matter. So we use central services, we use decentralized services. Where it makes sense, we use one. Where it makes sense, we use the other. But we always ask, what is the value proposition? Because the event we've just shown you could not run that on a blockchain. No one can do 20 billion transactions a second and are nowhere near where blockchain is.
Well, I think the point you are making too is this is a societal shift, and when you look at the capacity of where technology is going, there's going to be some great opportunity here. You had mentioned a little bit there about AI. That in itself is going to really create some new experiences on its own, much less what we'll see in terms of fan engagement, things of that nature going forward. I want to jump over to the topic of MSquared. Improbable opens up the tech behind Bored Apes, Ape Metaverse, obviously MSquared. The engine behind this. Talk to me a little bit about what MSquared is, because I know it's a separate entity as opposed to Improbable itself. Kind of go down that direction and what the plans are here.
So there's a lot of technology and a lot of separate pieces. So I'll talk a bit more about the economic framework and why that's important, and then I'll touch on technology. And yeah, this is some really cool demos you're showing on screen, memorable events from our recent history. But what I will say is, I think what we've realized painfully over the last decade is that there is a fundamental economic problem with video games right now.
Yeah.
And that problem is the cost of user acquisition is ridiculous. It costs $10 a person on average to make someone play a free game. Let's just do the maths of that, right? A free game. Not working, right? That's why a lot of games companies now are just paring back to the franchises they know.
Exactly.
You see layoffs, you see problems in the industry. And the other challenge that people need to internalize is the probability of a team making a hit game, even if they've made many hit games before. And I've seen this firsthand, and we support some of the largest games companies in the world, and people don't know this, but we do a lot of like services work for them as well. It's basically like roulette. There is no one with a magic formula to go make a hit game. Unlike, interestingly, in music and film, where you see consistent successes created by the same people, games are a lot more variable. So with that in mind, right, it really doesn't, to me, make a lot of sense that a bunch of projects try to hoard users, try to create their own platforms. And so what MSquared is trying to do is to say, look, it's hard enough as it is to create compelling experiences. And a lot of the industries that we want to work with have loads of users. Instead of a licensing model, which is what Fortnite and Roblox effectively are, they're traffic-based networks. They own the user, they earn the equity value, they own the multiple on that revenue. You're a guest there. And yeah, that can be really great for marketing. But you can't build a business like that. What is the IPO-able value of a business wholly dependent on Roblox? What is the revenue multiple, right? 1x, 2x, if that, you're not going to get there. So the idea behind MSquared is a radical view. We don't take 20%. We don't even take, we take, I think it's like 2% is the current number. We don't own the user. You own the user. You own the asset. You own the metaverse. When you went to that baseball experience, you didn't even know it was running on MSquared. But behind the scenes, like the plumbing, like the sort of network that we are, we ensure that all the different metaverse operators on top have the option to do pretty incredibly interoperable things. So avatars can freely move from world to world. Items can freely move from world to world. People can create commercial relationships across experiences that don't have to limit them to one metaverse or another. And crucially, because we are targeting companies with massive numbers of users, but very little engagement and monetization, they're actually happy to share users. They're happy to share users because there isn't always a game on. There isn't always a concert on. And so it makes a lot of sense to create value that way. Now, that said, we also are interested in ordinary open source creators. We have a live world right now at construct.msquared.io. It's like a debug space. And we want to let those ordinary creators build content that these bigger brands can bring into their worlds as well. So it's a
I
different
want to
model.
get, yeah, for sure. And I think this is, it really does open up the opportunity here, I think, for a lot of creators and developers kind of going forward. I want to jump over to the demo. And
Sure.
we have a demo clip here of the construct. And I want to play it for you and then kind of get your explanation of how this works, all that kind of stuff. All right, so we're showing, okay, so we're showing the construct now. And obviously, kind of walk us through what the framework here is, maybe what the mission is for the construct.
Sure. So the construct's a completely free, always on metaverse that is non-commercial. Its purpose is really to create an environment where any creator can walk up to a plinth and just use basically JavaScript and MML to create an object and instantiate it into the world. And it's a way of letting people develop, test, experiment, explore. We host like weekly creator meetups in here, which are a lot of fun. I think we did a lecture for like a Swizz school here randomly as well. So this is like oh, there's a dinosaur right there, actually, hilariously enough. This is like it's a completely raw, like if you've ever seen The Matrix, this is like the back rooms, right? This is the non-branded, non-professional, non-polished, rough part of the metaverse where crazy things happen. Someone threw a Daft Punk stage at me. That was strange. The people have made guessing games, hot air balloons, and this is all just made by ordinary creators using an open source language. So Construct's where we test the bleeding edge stuff. It can support about 1,000 people off the bat,
Okay.
logging anywhere, just as a test space.
Interesting stuff. All right, so this is good. I mean, for advancing the technology, obviously you get a lot of creators in here. It could really kind of change the game in terms of just the ideation that comes out of this. So very cool.
It's just a debug space. It's not something that's intended to house or to be used for consumers. This is really just a place where in the middle of development and you don't want to deploy it yourself, you might use Construct. So that's really what it's for. And what's interesting is this isn't provided for a lot of other services, which is pretty essential. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that helps kind of go forward. You guys are doing things quite a bit differently. I was looking at this headline right here. Obviously, you guys are a SoftBank backed startup, but you have a partnership here that's started to roll out, and that is with Google and NVIDIA. So talk to me about what this partnership means for Improbable.
So this is the really weird thing about MSquared. It isn't like a normal technology or platform play in that Improbable is just one supplier of potentially many other suppliers of technology. Like if you want to use a particular streaming service, or if you are a networking provider that's in direct competition with Improbable and you want to provide your services to companies on the network, you can. So the goal of MSquared is really to facilitate the development and investment in infrastructure by many companies that exceeds the appetite of any one business and can benefit lots and lots of other companies. One of the main problems with content-based platforms is that they eat so much value that the value that could be created with businesses on top is not created. And this is a way of rectifying that. So you see partners there like Google, Ubitus, NVIDIA for streaming, but you can basically plug in kind of any component relevant, different game engines. You can build your own game engine. And the MSquared sort of leadership team, board, and founding team of which I'm part, the goal there really is to, this is a very, very old demo from that isn't even our current tech that's now on screen, but hilariously enough, still looks cool. But look, our goal really is to invite different providers to contribute value to the network. And it's not exclusive. It's not something where a provider only has to work with us. That's another big difference in view of MSquared. The goal is to create something additive, not to take away from other platforms.
All right, so that's interesting. In terms of your ideas, do you think large-scale multiplayer games are kind of getting out of reach for indie games?
Not at all. I mean, the first event you showed a clip of there, the one with the space which we were all hanging out in, I made that with Rob when I had pneumonia. And I was unable to get out of bed. And we did it with 2 hours notice on Twitter. We pressed some buttons and clicked a link, and Rob coded live in the world all the objects in the world that you see.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, and I was literally puking blood in between hosting the event. I mean, that T-Rex was made by an indie community maker on our Discord. There's a person called Directive Creator who's made some incredible stuff. I don't think he made the dinosaur. So yeah. Being in reach for anybody is very important. And this is also another way in which you might think some of our decisions are surprising. Like for those who are technically minded, JavaScript doesn't feel like a game development language. Right. But I picked it because we picked it because it's the most accessible thing. Brands and companies They make websites. They know how to do that. They have agencies that know how to do that. So we've sacrificed some decisions that maybe a hardcore gaming business would make. But we've done that to make something that's really, really accessible. And by the way, GPT and other LLMs are very good at writing JavaScript because there's a lot of it out there, which has been
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
useful.
A lot of good base to compare. And again, that gets back to this whole evolution of where we are in Web 2, even 2.5, versus what we could see developing out of it. Because you need that, that developer base, you need that infrastructure out there to really kind of make a big leap forward. I want to jump over to Unreal Engine versus wallets. And within this, there's one thing I wanted to show here. This was in the MSquared roadmap. It was on the Morpheus platform. But I was looking at this right here, and
Oh,
just mainly talking about support for single sign-on. But the point is MetaMask, Coinbase Wallet, et cetera, tying into this. I mean, how would this work with, say, an Unreal for the future? Because that would seem kind of counterbalancing that.
good. Remember that there are different, your choice of engine and your specific licensing relationship or deal on technology. One of the cool things about the platform is like you could use Unity, you could use Unreal, you could use a completely custom engine, and that may change other choices you make about what you can and can't do commercially. The point of that is to say that some of the metaverses that run on MSquared love and embrace NFTs and Web3. They want to make
Right.
that front and center. They want the user to know about it. Others want to just feel like Web 2 and Web 2.5 businesses.
Oh,
and
okay.
what the remarkable thing is, you can do either. And behind the scenes, we keep track of the difference. So an item could be an NFT, but it doesn't have to be. And that means that in certain jurisdictions and also for certain use cases, things can just be ordinary game items. And being able to bridge
Right.
the two is one of the big strengths of the network. So yeah,
Yeah,
if you're
for
if you're
sure.
prohibited from using something, you can't. But on the other hand, if you want to mix and match a lot of components that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to fit together, this is a great way to do it.
Well, I think those kinds of thought-provoking ideas around development are very important, especially at this stage where we're seeing so much really new tech hit the ground running for kind of the future. You need that kind of, somewhat of an open architecture to kind of get those things done. I want to jump over to the topic of Tim Sweeney, Fortnite. And Tim has been kind of a love-hate for Web3 and a good champion out there for creators, because he's obviously gone to battle with Apple and the idea of these closed gardens, but he's also gone to battle with Web3 and NFTs. Why do you think that someone who is really very creative, has a very creative company, has kind of gone this direction? Do you think he'll ever change his opinion of where this is going in the future?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I would say about Tim Sweeney, and I've met him a few times and engaged with him, and Improbable has a relationship with Epic. He's a generational talent. He is one of the most important creators, developers, programmers, frankly, in the history of gaming. He has significantly changed the trajectory of video games, of the world, of metaverses. He inspired me. I mean, when we had issues and problems, he's the guy that rang up at 3 a.m. to kind of help that out. So I have nothing but love and respect for Tim Sweeney and for Epic Games. We have a lot of ex-Epic people in the company. That said, right, he's also very motivated by his own ideological views, some of which I violently agree with and some of which I disagree with. And I'm sure the same would be true if he looked at my views. I think from the position of somebody, and I'll be more neutral, from the position of, say, Roblox or any large gaming platform company, you have a real dilemma. And the dilemma is pretty obvious, right? Which is, you have your own content. In the case of Fortnite, you have a desire to demonstrate the value of your platform, which you measure using user engagement, how many people you have, how much money they're spending. And things like NFTs and blockchain, while there are some legitimate concerns against them, there's also a long-term economic collision between closed and open platforms that is inevitable, right? If I can take my item out of your world, if I can take it hypothetically, let's leave Epic out of it. If I can take an item out of Call of Duty and move that into another game, that isn't good for Call of Duty or that other game. Because
Right.
unlike in culture, where we're all happy to share users and these users are plentiful, in gaming, someone spent $10 to acquire that user. And the last thing in the world they want to do, even within, what's interesting, what a lot of people don't realize is, even inside a company like Microsoft, there's actually competition between the studios. The idea, even under subsidiaries of large gaming companies, that they will share value is fiercely contested in a lot of businesses. So the economics of video games are very exclusionary to the notion of value moving from one world to another, unless they're all part of one basically centralized owned platform. This is a big part of why MSquared is focused on non-gaming businesses. And a few people have remarked, like, why aren't we talking to games companies? It's not because we don't want to build games. It's because the economics of video games fundamentally don't let them agree to things like avatar movement and item movement freely along worlds. That is against their business model, and they're rational to oppose that. So I think the future we'll see Epic being very successful with Fortnite and UEFN, Roblox being very successful, but they will be successful based on a long tail of creators who they will harness. I think as you get beyond a certain amount of revenue or success, you're going to want to build your own thing. I mean, League of Legends started as a mod on Warcraft 3. But in the end, they moved off because the economics of being a mod meant you couldn't commercialize. So that is what will happen unless these platforms change their thinking.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, I think you kind of gave some good explanations there of why this is the framework in which Epic looks at this, especially with Sweeney's opinion and viewpoint. When you look at, I guess, the growth of this sector, Web3 games, obviously you guys are doing some things with Bored Ape, with the other side Metaverse, but how many other Web3 games are out there that you guys are working with? What's that roadmap look like there?
Maybe I'd put this a different way. How many non-Web3 brands and companies are hopping on board, not because they care about crypto, but because they want the experiences that we've described and they want to reach their users with them?
Tell me that.
Is the so I mean, you've seen 3 Premier League players or 2 Premier League players and probably the biggest influencer in football hop on in the last couple of weeks alone in experiences. You've seen thousands of fans come. The game for Ukraine, Sky allowed us very kindly to broadcast that into the metaverse to thousands of people. I think that's the first time a broadcaster has let that happen, given where they are. You're seeing a rapid increase in the rate of events we're able to do because that reflects an increase in the number of partners that are getting excited. And what's exciting for me is even in a time when people are cutting down on extraneous expenses as corporations, they're not looking at the business problems that this can solve as being optional. If you want to reach or monetize your international audience, that's core. So that's exciting for me because we can stealth get those people to start adopting a digital asset, NFT, and Web3 mindset where it is helpful for their business without forcing that upon them. And the rate of adoption we've found has been pretty much linked to events. So as we do experiences, people are in them, they get excited, then their company rings us up, and then on and on we go. We don't actually do any BD outreach at the moment of any kind at Improbable. Everything we do is inbound, which is a really exciting position to be in. Sadly, took 10 years to get to that position, but it's great that people are excited.
All right, so we've got a lot to cover. I know we've been going here for a little bit, but I want to go to a clip actually right now and play this for you, just to kind of get a framework. You kind of explaining to it, but let's go ahead and play this clip real quick.
Fans of the silver screen sensation can now step into Mattel's Barbie Land through immersive pop-up experiences in select cities around the world. The pop-up economy generating up to $80 billion in annual revenue, according to Capital One, and is projected to rake in $95 billion in 2025. Nearly half of pop-ups costing less than $5,000 to launch. It may be the next big thing in the experience economy. What are these people doing?
Right.
How much are they about strictly adults versus family affair or even focused on children?
Yeah, I think the larger pop-up activations definitely bring in families and kids. Alexa Mead did the Alice in Wonderland pop-up in New York City all summer, which offered activities and events for kids and adults. Pop-ups really are designed for brand awareness, customer engagement, and sales. So if you think about those costs and then you compare it to traditional advertising, it actually works out pretty well.
All right, so with that, obviously you've got a lot of opportunity here. You guys have done music concerts, you've been into the sporting leagues. We're seeing this now from a retail sector. What are the opportunities here with these kinds of retail activations that could go into VR, AR, all sorts of ideas here? What are your thoughts?
Well, let's think about the different types of partner and what they would want. I think if you're anybody with a very large audience, music is a great example, but film is another one, where only a tiny fraction of that audience's love for what you are providing can really be engaged, can be manifested into experiences, then the metaverse is golden. Like if you're an artist with a distributed fan base who've never come together, never celebrated, never interacted, the kind of magic of bringing that audience together really shouldn't be underestimated. There's a branch of psychology called self-determination theory, and I wrote a lot about this in my book, Virtual Society, but the basic concept is people need fulfilling experiences and engagement. And that's much better than just consuming something. So if I just watch something or listen to something, that's one thing. But if I'm actually interacting, if I'm having an experience, if that experience involves me making decisions that matter, then my level of relationship with that thing becomes vastly more important. And that is ultimately what drives revenue. People care about things and they have experiences that matter, and then that drives their ability and their desire to own and possess digital items or experiences in a different form. So I think for brands who want to appeal to a younger audience now that are just coming home and logging into video games and that's where they live, and who expect things to be experiential, I think there's a bit of a race to construct a new approach to a brand language. I mean, because advertising in general, moving from awareness to an emotional connection to that core of people who can become ultra loyal to what it is that you are communicating in a way that's also beneficial for them. That's really the opportunity. That's the opportunity. And you see companies like Adidas moving into this space. You see Nike with what they've done with Clonex and their kind of confidence in that space. This is clearly where we're going. I mean, LVMH, Kering Group, this is the direction of travel for brands.
Yeah, we kind of flashed some charts here on the screen just because some of our listeners might be listening in the podcast side, but this was revenue of attendance by virtual concerts, and you look at that potential. This obviously was the Travis Scott ticket sales. So the opportunity there for metaverse integration into a lot of these entertainment vehicles are going to be real. I just wonder if there's going to be a future here for, projects like Ticketmaster, that are more of that physical, component. Then you look at, Go ahead. You're going to add to that.
I'd say I don't know if that's I think that's I think that I talk to musicians all the time as part of this, and what I hear is it's not a great industry for if you're not Taylor Swift. Like if you get a billion streams on Spotify, you make very little, and a lot of the money from events goes directly to people like Ticketmaster and other groups and venues. So if more of the share of the value in the metaverse is going to the creator, to the artist, that really should not be underestimated, because in the end, the talent decide where the value is. And if they would rather engage this way. The other interesting thing is for talent, for tours, to use your example of concerts, it's a pretty big hassle to travel the world like hundreds of times a year. Now, if suddenly you're older, maybe you're unable to, maybe there's places you can't go to. If you can now interact with fans in a more accessible way for you, we found that makes talent more willing to do it, more willing to be open, less hassle, more comfortable having conversations that maybe they wouldn't have in the real world.
I wish we could see more comedians kind of going in this direction, because there's some really good Titan comedians that carry, almost like football clubs in essence. They have very rabid fans. I think they could easily make that kind of leap. I was looking also at this, this group right here. So, flagrant 2, if you're out there listening in right now, Andrew, this is what you need to do. Interactive entertainment and metaverse eventually form critical pillar of studio, direct-to-consumer strategy, tying some consumer products. You've got Disney in the hunt here, Paramount in the hunt, Sony, Warner Brothers, of course, kind of winning a little bit here with the fact that they've started to expand in this. First of all, do you feel like the shift between all entertainment, and this is in real life, this expansion of what we'll see in the metaverse, how big is this industry really going to be in the next decade? Because I just look at this and the markers are here that could absolutely just explode. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, I talk about some book, but here's what really stunned me, right? So the first monument ever made by human beings, thousands of years before Stonehenge, predating agriculture, Göbekli Tepe, it must have cost a vast amount of resources to create. It's like a bunch of huge pillars in Turkey. From the very dawn of our species, we've cared more about the world of ideas, the other world, the experiences, the meaning of the things that we do, than we have about the real world. If you're a football fan, you know exactly what I mean. The meaning, it actually doesn't matter who wins a football match. They happen every year. But the meaning is so profound that it can make you anguish like you've just lost a loved one, or it can make you feel bliss as though you've reached heaven. So the amount of spend, if you're asking me how big is the market for things that people are willing to kill for, things that people are so passionate about that they'll travel the world for, I think it's limitless. I'm an Indian, and in India, like cricket and, if you're a Bollywood fan or a cricket fan, the amount of money you're going to pay to meet your idol or to whatever is all the money you have minus what you need to eat, right? The passion K-pop fans have. A friend of mine's a K-pop producer, and the things he's told me about K-pop, it's wild. I think actually, I'd flip the question around. how do we make sure that as this swallows our culture and our society, which is demographic shifts imply that it will, that's a healthy and good thing, and that the way it is organized spreads the value and productivity and benefits, not just to one company, but to many. And that's one of the things we're trying to solve with MSquared. I honestly think, especially as you consider automation, tackling the productivity of other industries, this is the future of our economy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, obviously we're seeing a lot of tool sets too that are starting to make that reality. You look at just things around AR, VR, and kind of where that plugs into this in the future. What are your thoughts with, obviously two different strategies, but at least strategies that are moving this direction? You have the Meta strategy, which is a bit more immersive. You've got the Apple strategy, more of this, augmented reality concept with Vision Pro. Do you think this is going to be kind of a split world of interactivity where we'll see these immersives where you kind of are jumping into metaverses and you'll have this tool that you'll have for real life that's more augmented? What are your thoughts on that technology shifting here?
All of the above. All
All
of
of the
the
above.
above. I think
I like
if you
it.
want to reach an international football fan base, you got to be on mobile. That's where those people are, right? But if you want to have a super immersive, interactive experience with a very cool fan base, VR is a great option. That's why we've built our technology agnostically. We've had people build VR experiences. We've had people build mobile experiences. I don't think that the platform should dictate the commercial strategy. The audience and the audience problem and the specifics of of a given experience should allow seamless movement and seamless transfer of value from one type of experience to another. And I think what both companies are getting right is an investment in immersion. What both companies are getting wrong is creating an economic situation that discourages investment in their platforms from companies and individuals, because they won't own anything in the end and they won't be able to build businesses that can seek independent investment. That has to change. And with the recent laws in the EU around the European Markets Bill, it's clear that this type of consolidated platform play would likely not even work in the future for regulators, especially in Europe. I can't speak to the rest of the world.
No, I would agree. I would agree with that. That's definitely a bigger conversation. I want to jump into our last couple of questions for you, and this is more on the roadmap side for Improbable. Talk to me about, the current update, and we've talked a little about where you guys are today, but let's talk about the next 18 months. This is going to be a really critical time, not only for adoption, but we're going to see regulatory play into this. We're going to see, maybe for the first time, real consumers realizing what's happening. It's going to be like light bulbs coming on. Where are you guys going over the next 18 months?
For us right now, the focus is about never ending, creating a higher and higher rate of public events and experiences with ever more diverse partners that expose the possibilities of the metaverse to as many people as possible and develop the different formats and strategies that can be fun and that can work. It's a lot like TV or film in some ways. You have to figure out what the format, what the genre is that's right for the medium, and then that becomes duplicated and duplicated. So for us, the next 18 months is really jam-packed with basically public events and experiences, some around sport as a big focus, but many other areas too. And getting that, really figuring out the content side of things with partners. What are the experiences that make sense? Like you mentioned a comedian, what would that experience look like? What would make it great? What would make it better? How can we add to it? And doing that as a community. One of the benefits of MSquared is, of course, items and value are shared in many ways. So people can create open source solutions and benefit from them. We can create content and other people can copy them. So that's one. The other side is on the technology. While we're always trying to increase scale, I think we've now reached a point where most use cases that we currently can comprehend, we are well within the scale limits of what we can do now. But we want to make the tooling really, really good. We want to make it possible for anyone to be able to create content in an effective way. And we want to work towards making more of the economic aspects of the network, digital assets, how they're sold, how they operate, really making that as convenient as possible for people who are not Web3 natives. That is a fundamental part of our thinking. So those are the three areas, really: content experimentation, continued improvement to accessibility and commerce, and also just really, the interoperability aspects we've talked about also come into play, defending that as new partners join, making sure every new partner agrees to the rules that we've set out relating to sharing, users and items. Because without that, the integrity of the network, becomes harder to maintain. So that's key to us as well.
Okay, so Herman, last question to you. When do we see an M2 token?
I just, that's such a Web3 question. MSquared really is not about, it's not a token-driven project in that sense. It's trying to build utility, as you've seen, in a very functional and useful way. in the future, would it make sense for us to adopt? We probably wouldn't make, but to adopt a token or to in some way provide a digital asset story around the network? Maybe,
Right.
but I think if we were to do that, it would be the opposite of what everyone else has done. So we would not
Interesting.
want to sell value up front before delivering anything, make lots of money, and then deliver something later. I just don't believe in that. I think it's important to deliver something. And if it's really valuable, if people are really using it, then maybe questions like, should there be a token, come into play. But I don't think
Yeah.
that's the first question you ask. And I think when you ask that question first, you create very perverse incentives for yourself and for your customers. And that's not something that I want to do.
Well, that's it's interesting because that's pretty much what Web3 has been built on is a lot of blue sky, which is really kind of what, if you look back even at the birth of Silicon Valley, a lot of those companies in the early 2000s that birthed many of those projects were building on stuff that would never happen.
It's not just that; it's actually worse than that. And I'm not calling out any particular projects here. I mean, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, for example, there's nothing wrong with a company doing a secondary sale. Improbable has done secondary sales,
Sure.
and releasing equity value for people is fine. But if I sell you the idea that I'm going to make you a football stadium, and then I can get ridiculously rich personally from retail money and never deliver that football stadium.
Yeah.
Or in fact, let me put it another way. Why should I deliver that football stadium? If I have made $100 million in personal, I think there's something wrong with that. Now, I'm not of the camp that the regulatory approach taken in the US is the right one, but I am of the camp that there is potential for harm, and we do need to find a middle ground here, right? Where things work. I don't like the notion of companies creating no value and yet individuals profiting. I don't think that's right.
Interesting stuff. Probably for a much bigger and longer podcast for sure. Herman Narula, we appreciate you coming in today. It's been great having you. So thanks again for stopping in.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in maybe on the podcast side of things right now. What I would do right now is jump over here to YouTube. This particular podcast had a lot of really good examples of where Improbable is going, but more importantly, maybe where Metaverse and where the future of gaming is going to be going, and also entertainment. This changes, I think, a lot, and obviously Improbable pretty much at one of the areas of the center of what's happening. So jump over here, subscribe to the show, and make sure and click that bell so you get some live, some of our live notifications. Also, if you're not in our Diamond Circle, make sure and jump in. It's our free group. It's where we do additional podcasts, additional research, a lot of our own insights on where the market is going. All you have to do is click the link down below. And of course, if you want to reach me out there on Twitter, it is @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.